Got an important video this week, so as always, I hope you'll like and comment on the video. But most importantly, I hope you'll share this with other riders and help spread the word that we're promoting here on MC Rider. Emergency braking is a core skill that every rider needs to stay sharp with. When you need it right then. So if you've not kept that skill sharp, it's likely not going to be there when you need it out on the road, and you're likely to make one of these common braking mistakes that we'll discuss in today's video. Remember, when it comes to riding a motorcycle with skill, technique is king. So today we'll compare the emergency braking techniques of the rider who avoids the crash with the rider who becomes another crash statistic. The question is, which one are you? The first mistake is one that can only be overcome with practice because the improper technique is a built-in reaction that we all have to danger. Have you ever seen a new toddler, a toddler that's just barely sitting up? They're sitting on the floor and they lose balance a little bit. What do they do in that situation? Every child I've ever seen does the same exact thing. They start to lose balance and their arms go up. They react, they flinch to the situation. This is not a learned reaction. We don't teach the kids to do this. It's built into us by our Creator. It serves us well when we trip and fall because we use our arms to protect our torso. But that same instinct causes problems for us on a motorcycle when a car pulls out in front of us. Because our reaction in that situation is to immediately grab the front brake of the motorcycle. So let me tell you a couple of stories from my own riding experience. I used to work for a major airline, and I commuted back and forth to work every day on a motorcycle. I was coming home one day, and I was in the far left-hand lane. I had a solid line next to me. A car pulled up. I had about a gap and a half or a car and a half length in front of me. That car pulled up. It crossed that solid line, got in front of me, and immediately slammed their brakes on when they got in front of me. My reaction, I grabbed the front brake, and before I knew it, I was on my side and I was sliding down the road. So let's fast forward several years into the future. I'm again still working at that same major airline. I'm commuting back and forth to work on a motorcycle. I'm rounding a blind right-hand curve. Okay, this time I've got my head and eyes turned and I'm looking through that curve, and the trees are blocking my view up the road. As I round that curve, I see a car has decided to make a U-turn right in the middle of the road. So a big SUV is blocking the entire two-lane road that I've got available to me. What did I do in that situation? Got my head and eyes turned. I see the car. I straighten the motorcycle up. I pull in the clutch. I begin applying the front and the rear brakes smoothly. I can remember thinking in my head, am I going to get stopped? Am I going to get stopped? I came to a stop. Forks rebounded, had about 4 or 5 feet between me and the car that I avoided crashing into. So I've told you 2 stories from my own riding experience. What I haven't told you yet is what happened in between that first crash and the near instant. After the first crash, I got serious about learning to ride a motorcycle well. So after my broken collarbone healed up and I got my arm out of a sling, I took the basic rider course again. I then took a few advanced classes. I attended a track day. But most importantly, I began practicing on my own, because practicing on my own on a regular basis, just for 15, 20 minutes on a lunch break, I'd go to a parking lot and I would practice. That's where I saw the most growth as a rider. I eventually became certified as an MSF and a total control instructor. So during that first crash, my instinct kicked in. I locked up the brakes and I crashed. And to be totally honest, that first crash was much more avoidable than the second instant that I shared, where I actually did avoid the crash. But by the time that second event occurred, I had to a degree exchange my natural reaction of flinching and grabbing the brakes for proper braking technique. Now I say the words to a degree because no rider is perfect. Even rider coaches, even riders who practice all the time can still fall back to their own instincts, but in this instance, I performed well. And if I want to perform well into the future, it's important that I continue to hone that braking skill, otherwise it degrades over time. You see, instincts and poor riding habits die hard. They can and do flare up at times, but by continuing to practice and train, we shift the odds in our favor that we'll perform the correct technique in the future. But I can promise you this, if you took the BRC years ago and you've not practiced those skills since then, the odds are definitely not in your favor. How many videos can you find online where a rider is faced with an emergency braking situation and they lock up the rear end of the motorcycle, causing the motorcycle to slide and crash? You know, a lot of times this rider will say, yeah, I did that on purpose. I laid the bike down. What really happened is they panicked, they locked up the brakes, and they crashed. You can find a whole lot of videos like that. There are two primary culprits when this happens. Either they don't know how to brake, or they think they know how to brake, but they were given bad information. When I was learning to ride, I got my license at the age of 14. I remember a piece of advice the police officer gave me who administered the skills test to me back then. He said, stay away from the front brake, it can kill you. And that was bad advice in 1979, and it's still bad advice today, but one that sadly many riders still believe. So let's take a look at a quick stop on a motorcycle and see what we can learn from it. Here's some older footage of me performing a quick stop on a Yamaha Super Tenere. What I want you to pay attention to is what happens to the front forks as I apply the front and rear brake in this emergency stop. So let's play that moment of stop back and forth a little bit, and you can see how much the front forks compress during an emergency stop, putting a whole lot of weight on that front tire. So we see from this demonstration why the front brake is so important. While locking the front tire up leads to bad things, not using the front brake at all will also lead to a bad result. So we need to use both brakes. But there's been a trend that I've seen lately with some riders in the last couple of decades or so. The problem seems to reverse. They use only the front brake, and this seems more true of sport bike riders for some reason than riders of other styles of bikes. And while using only the front brake is not as bad or dangerous as using just the rear brake, it's still far from ideal. Depending on what motorcycle you ride, the front brake provides 60 to 90% of your stopping power. You know, there are a lot of factors that determine what that ratio is, but in general, sport bikes rely more on the front brake, and cruisers have a more balanced reliance on the front and the rear brake because of the way is distributed and the way the forks on the motorcycle are set up. But the point is this, if you have to stop in an emergency to save your life, do you want to give up 10 to 40% of your stopping power? I don't. I want 100% of my stopping power used in a controlled manner to get that motorcycle to a stop quickly and as safely as possible. That's only accomplished by correctly using the front and the rear brake in unison. Now, this is an interesting argument that many riders believe, that they have ABS so they don't need proper braking technique. Their point is, why should I learn to practice proper braking when I've got ABS? I just grab the brakes and I let the ABS do its thing. Now, I've researched this subject a few times and I've still not found what I would call a definitive answer to this dilemma. But here's what I do know about braking and its relationship to ABS. Can we all agree that the quickest way to stop a motorcycle is to use the front and rear brake in unison to the threshold of traction? So you're braking to the point just to the limit of traction on those tires, and that's the way to get the motorcycle to a stop in the shortest distance possible. So if we can all agree on that statement, then in order to stop in the shortest distance, locking up the tires is a bad thing. If you do lock up the tires and you don't have ABS, you're most likely going to crash like I did in the first story I told you earlier. Or if you do have ABS and you lock up the tires, the most likely result is extending the stopping distance slightly as the ABS adjusts to you locking the tires up, with the added benefit of not crashing as a result of locking the tires up. Because on a good surface with a well-maintained motorcycle, stopping in the shortest distance possible is a result of braking quickly and smoothly to the threshold of traction, not over it. So don't hear from this argument and think that I'm against ABS. I think ABS is a fantastic tool, and I've got more confidence in my braking ability on a motorcycle that has ABS. I want ABS on my motorcycle. I just don't want to use this tool as a crutch to bad braking technique. All day long, ABS will outperform any rider in wet conditions, when the road surface is bad, when they grab the brakes, or if the motorcycle, particularly the tires, are not maintained well. ABS is a backup plan, though, to keep a rider from crashing. ABS is not designed to shorten stopping distance. To shorten stopping distance, good technique wins under ideal conditions. But it is comforting to know that my motorcycle has the tools in place if I overbrake, the conditions are slick, or the surface conditions change mid-brake. ABS is there to keep me upright. Both my Challenger and my Rocket 3 have traction control on them, but I don't rev the throttle to the limit and pop the clutch whenever I leave a stop sign, even though traction control would kick in and it would keep me from losing traction, or in the case of the Rocket 3, from flipping over backwards. By that same measure, it's lazy to just slam on the brakes if I need to stop in a hurry. Both traction control and ABS are awesome tools that I'm 100% in favor of if my humanity shines through on the road and I'm making a mistake in an emergency situation. But ABS is not a substitute for proper braking technique any more than pulling out and releasing the clutch is a substitute for having traction control on your motorcycle. Have you ever performed a normal stop, or especially a quick stop on a motorcycle, and the motorcycle's been out of balance when you come to a stop? The cause for this may be where you're looking as you perform the stop. If you look down at the front tire, at the tank, or at the instrumentation, you're going to likely be off balance when you come to a stop. The solution for this is to keep your head and eyes up. It gives your brain a mental reference to see the horizon and keeps you more in balance as the motorcycle comes to a stop. Another common reason that the motorcycle stops out of balance is because the handlebars are not square or straight when you come to a complete stop. If they're just slightly turned, the motorcycle is going to want to fall over in that direction, especially in an emergency stop, because so much weight is on the front end of the motorcycle when you come to your stop. Sometimes this can't be helped because of the road surface. You know, cracks in the road or uneven road surface tend to pull the handlebars to one side or another as the motorcycle stops. But another common reason has to do with the riding posture, or your riding posture, as you perform the quick stop. So during a quick stop on a motorcycle, there's a whole lot of forces at play that are pulling you forward, and the motorcycle and you want to keep moving in that forward direction. In order to hang on to the motorcycle, we have a tendency to grip the handlebars tightly, or to put a lot of pressure on the handlebars that keeps us from sliding forward, but that force of us moving forward and grabbing the handlebars can cause uneven pressure on the bars as we come to a stop. The solution for this is how we hold on to the motorcycle. We should be holding on as much as possible with our knees onto the tank of the motorcycle. If I'm holding onto the tank of the motorcycle with my knees and keeping as much pressure as I can off the handlebars, it gives me a better chance of stopping in balance. Now, you're not going to be able to support all of that weight, but a significant portion of it you can put on your knees, and that keeps pressure off of the handlebars. So hold on to the motorcycle with your knees and try to be out of the way as much as possible on the motorcycle, and let the motorcycle do its job. So if I have a choice between performing a perfect emergency stop, and I mean everything is by the book, I've applied the front and rear brakes quickly and smoothly, the tires are braking at threshold of traction, my head and eyes are up, I'm looking down the road, the bike's in perfect balance when it comes to a stop, my left foot goes down first smoothly to the pavement as I keep my right foot on the rear brake. I mean, a picture perfect stop. Once the threat's taken care of, I immediately check my mirrors to make sure the traffic behind me is coming to a stop as well, so I can have that perfect stop to avoid a crash or not having to emergency brake at all. And I'll pick not having to emergency brake at all day, every day. This can only be accomplished if I'm looking up the road, maintaining a good following distance, and using situational awareness to read the traffic around me. If I'm doing all of that, the need for emergency braking becomes the exception rather than the rule. And I see in comments on my YouTube channel all the time riders complaining that their life is in constant danger on the road, because of other drivers. I ride in one of the most populated regions of the country in Dallas and Fort Worth, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've had to use high-level emergency skills to avoid a crash. That's with a whole lot of miles and a whole lot of years of riding. There have been many other times where I've said to myself, man, I'm glad I wasn't too close to him, or I'm glad I was aware of what he might do, and that was a result of using good road strategy. If your life is in constant danger on the road, unless you live in one of those countries where scooters and cars are just going everywhere on the road, the problem is most likely related to your road strategy and not the inherent dangers of riding a motorcycle. Our goal as a skilled rider is to develop our skills as riders to the best of our ability and then ride on the road in a manner where we rarely need to use those skills. So not having to take constant maneuvers to save our life can only happen through good road strategy, and that's probably the most important tip of this entire video. Till next week, guys, it's Kevin with MC Rider, and I'll see you on the road.